Yeah, definitely appreciate that. And when you reached out to me and you said, "Hey, what's the topic that you wanted to that I wanted to speak about on this webinar?" Um, the leaning in on the journey really like came up like right away for me because um, what I think is super interesting that happens in today's day and age is, every single person listening to this has a Facebook, an Instagram, a Twitter, probably LinkedIn, multiple social media channels. And, over time, you're going to have, the personal development or the inspirational meme or quote, come up. It's going to be from Jim Rohn. It's going to be from Rumi. It's going to be from Winston Churchill. It's going to be from Theodore Roosevelt. Whatever it is, it's going to be this little gold nugget 2-line thing, or from Abe Lincoln, and it's going to be this quote that says something. And people, myself included, for a long time, you look at it, you read it, and you go, "Whoa, that's deep." Yeah, I totally get it. And there's something to say when, the quote is by a person that we know enough about their history to know that they did some amazing things. So if the quote is by Marilyn Monroe, if the quote is by John F. Kennedy, if the quote's by Martin Luther King, if it's by Jim Rohn, if it's by Tony Robbins, if it's by Grant Cardone, if it's by Gary Vee, you're like, whoa, hustle, grind, 10x, unleashed, unstoppable, all of these things. But really, um, understanding what that actually means and implementing those pieces of it. And, to answer your question about like how I've transformed over the past 2 years, um, really hasn't been the last 2 years. It's really been the last 39 years that took me this way. But a couple of years ago, I really started to focus on one specific quote that I kept on seeing and people kept on referencing to say, and I don't know, remember who was the first person who said it. I'm not one to fact check quotes like this, but the quote just basically is that life is a journey. And, it's super easy to say that, right? Oh, life's a journey. Oh, it's a journey from birth until age or whatever it is. But I really took some time to think about that because I had had a series of events that happened in my life that, I could have looked at them as really negative experiences, but they were all some of the biggest growth experiences and some of the most life learning lessons was when something bad happened, right? When a business doesn't go well for you and you learn how to make it work, or you learn how to put systems in place to make it work, is a lot more helpful in your life than if someone just gave you $100,000 and said, "Here, start a business," because then you don't have the muscle memory and the skills, tactics, and tools to make it work. And so, I took this whole concept of life is a journey, really to heart, because if you think about it, if you go on a hike on a Saturday afternoon, right, you're going on a journey. Let's say we're going to climb a mountain, right, and in the Catskills of New York or somewhere on the Midwest or whatever it is, and we know it's going to be 20 miles to the top of this mountain, right? That journey, we're going to plan, how we get there and what we're going to do, right? Based on how much light we have left in the day, how much water we need. Do we want to take pictures when we get to the top of it, right? We're going to kind of plan out like this path, this journey. And when we get to the top, we're going to celebrate it. We're going to be grateful and amazing at this amazing view, right? It's why we're drawn to mountains. And then we've got a plan for how we're going to come back down the mountain, and go home and enjoy a meal. So if what I've really done over the past 2 years is fundamentally really leaned in on believing that. So when something goes wrong, quote unquote wrong, I don't think anything goes wrong anymore. To me, there is no bad experience. There's an opportunity for me to learn, and there's an opportunity to another word that is coming up for me. And I think that this coronavirus and place where we are now with COVID-19 is a perfect example of it. So when something doesn't go the way that I expected it to, I think about it for a little bit, probably about 90 seconds, maybe 3 minutes. And I go, all right, what's the message? What's the lesson or the message here? And how am I going to pivot from here and do it differently moving forward? And those have been really like my two tricks, tactics, strategies are no matter what, this is a journey. If I look at the journey in the last couple weeks, even, right? I was out in San Francisco in February, speaking at the RSA conference when this whole thing happened. I hopped on an airplane. I went to Puerto Rico to stay in a house in the mountains of Rincon, Puerto Rico. I had a bunch of content creators. We were partying, vacationing, creating content, surfing, and then flew back to New York just as this coronavirus thing started. And it didn't feel like it was the right place for me to stay. And I pivoted down here in North Carolina, to Asheville, North Carolina, where I will stay until we go back to whatever the new normal is. But there's so many different life events there that happen that no matter what, my life choices could have been either, had a negative in one mindset, could have been a negative thing or a positive thing. For example, I have not seen my daughter in about 30 or 40 days as a direct result of me coming down here to Asheville, North Carolina, instead of being in New York. But rather than focus on that as a negative thing, it's created an opportunity for me to build a more virtual relationship with her. So I'm ordering lab experiments for kids to do. I send one box to her house. I send one box to where I am, and we hop on Zoom and we do virtual volcanoes with baking soda and vinegar and make it all blow up together. We're learning how to play different card games together over Zoom, and it's really been an amazing experience rather than getting focused on it. And from a business perspective, one of the things that I've been doing down here in Asheville, North Carolina, I'm actually in somebody's brick and mortar business right now, is that many of these brick and mortar businesses, these small, medium-sized businesses that are used to doing everything with storefronts, while they may have some form of website or some sort of online presence, I've been coaching and mentoring people on how to take your business from brick and mortar to being fully digital very, very quickly. And so this dance studio that I'm doing this webinar from, for example, is a massive amount of space. And they have different dance studios and different types of dance. And they've converted them into basically like a TV studio, and the dancer comes to work every day and does their dance lesson over Zoom to all the people that are quarantined in their house, and the classes still go on. And from a mindset perspective, the idea of getting your blood flow going, getting better energy, putting your body in a different state, you are now empowering people, and this is a massive opportunity for people to, like you said earlier before we started this webinar, really deepen the relationships. I think that when we come out of this new normal, there's going to be a whole new world of new relationships that have been developed that are going to be deeper and more meaningful. And I can say that as somebody who's been a military veteran, some of my deepest relationships with some of my fellow veteran brothers and sisters are with veterans that I served with during missions that had some kind of adversity to it. Some of the most meaningful relationships that I have in my life are from people that I experienced elements of 9/11 with. And some of the other relationships that I have are deep rooted in the fact that we experienced the 2008 through 2010 recession in New York City. So I'm seeing this as a time for communities and networks to really unite, for people to really introduce and help and support each other. And I think that people, if I'm going to be super honest, I think that people are doing themselves a disservice and a disservice to themselves and a disservice to their communities by just not checking in with people every day, or using it as an opportunity to check in with people that you haven't heard from in a while and kind of reconnect with them. But I think that all goes back to like, oh, sorry, somebody was calling me for a second. I think that all goes into the fact of, I really think that leaning in on this journey and really believing and trusting that you're on a path that you have, obviously you have control over it. You have a control over it from an integrity perspective, from a values and beliefs perspective. You have some control of it. You have control to be like, how am I going to get from here to the top of the mountain? But along that way, if you continuously just reiterate to yourself and lean in on the fact that this is really part of the journey, and there are supposed to be bumps in the road, and there are supposed to be rocks on the trail, and there are supposed to be streams that you have to figure out ways to cross. And maybe there's some adventure on the way and some challenges on the way, kind of how the hero's journey goes. But that is the number one piece of my transformation. The second piece of it really is not to get too bound into anything and to always be ready to pivot. And I think what's going to happen as we try and move forward as a country, a nation, and as a global entity, the world is experiencing this, is that pivoting, or your ability to pivot very quickly as a business, is going to be really what defines you or not. Because if you think about it, and I know you run your own business, I run several businesses, lots of people listening probably have several businesses. The most expensive piece of having your own business is the build. And what happens if the ecosystem shifts the way it just did in the last couple of weeks? You shut down for a temporary, and then you got to decide whether or not you're going to spend the exact amount of time rebuilding it, or pivoting into some other direction that is just easier. And I think that that's what's really going to happen is that you're going to see the people and the businesses and the entrepreneurs that are really able to be successful during this time, the new normal, and whatever comes forward, is the businesses that are really set up to pivot very, very quickly. And I give you a lot of credit for doing this, because even this webinar series, that when you reached out to me and said, hey, would you be on this one? Right? This was you taking advantage of the time that you have and pivoting into something that you think would be very helpful and empower people. And that is going to create insulation in your community and in your network and make you even more successful. So I just want to commend you for that, because I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing. So there's kind of my 2 points on that. It really is just, if you're going to believe that life, this path that you are carving out for yourself, really is a journey, lean in on that. That's number one. And number two, I believe that pivoting and your ability to pivot and the mindset you can adopt to pivot when needed to is going to be the new normal.
Wow, I love both of those. Those are really great examples. So why don't you like share with us how like some like some of us who are, I guess, I hate saying the word average, but that are just that they're really not putting their all into what they have and all their capabilities of how to start taking micro steps towards that bigger prize, that bigger vision for their future.
Right. I think there's two, the first two steps. Number one, have a clear goal of what you're actually trying to achieve, right? And I'm going to come back to that actually in a second. The second piece of it is, and I really fundamentally believe in this, you need to have a third party work with you on that goal, either a coach, a mentor, an advisor, whatever you want to call it. I have several, at any given time, I have several coaches and mentors in my life. I speak to 3 of them a week, and they know the things that I'm working on, and they always challenge me. Did you get done what you need to get done today? Did you achieve what you want to get done this week? And the answer can go on, well, no, I didn't get it done this week. Well, why not? Well, something else came up. Well, maybe we need to change your goals because you're obviously not committed to this goal. And because a lot of the time we misrepresent what we're really trying to achieve. And I think there's a piece where we need to become super honest with ourselves. So what I mean by that is that um, a goal is something that can be measured, right? So a goal can't be, I want to be rich. A goal can't be, I want to be famous. A goal can't be, I want to start a business, right? Because those things have so many unknowns to them that there's no way to know whether or not you're successful at achieving that goal. And so what I've often found is that people will be able to say, well, I want to start my own business. All right, well, I filed for the LLC. I did a little bit of work. I realized it was hard. Um, it must be something I'm doing wrong. Um, woe is me, woe is me. Never mind. I'm going to go back and get a job. And what it turns out a lot of times is that you just don't have the systems in place, or you haven't done the math to achieve your goal. And what I mean by that is that if you were, instead of saying I want to be rich, it goes like this. It goes, you know what? I want to make $1 million next year. That's your first piece of that. And then you go, okay, well, what am I going to sell? Or what is my business? And if your business is, I'll just make some extremes up here. If your business is selling paper clips, you've got to do some math and figure out how many millions of paper clips you have to sell in order to make that $1 million. But then you have an actual goal to achieve that you can focus on, and you can know what works. So as long as you had, so the first piece of that is, and I know that's kind of a long-winded way to look at it, but the first piece is that I think you have to have a goal. And you need to have the second piece of it is I think you need to have a third party mentor, advisor, or coach who is going to constantly challenge you on that goal. And I can give you a really good example. One of my coaches, I'll back up for a second. On my wall in my office, I have all Post-its, and every day I move Post-its from what got done today, what can get done tomorrow, what's a cool idea that might advance further, and what's just kind of in the idea stage. And I move these Post-its through the days, and every day that's how I wrap up my entire day. And so one of my cool ideas I was trying to get done was I started my own podcast, and I had done a bunch of episodes, and then I suddenly just kind of dropped it. I got busy with some other stuff, and I had put it back into my priorities. And my coach finally reached out to me and said, Neal, what's your number one priority for this year? And I said, well, my number one priority for this year is I want to make X amount of millions of dollars this year. And my coach said, well, how does the podcast fit that goal? I mean, the podcast is going to be great, and you're used to speaking in front of people, and you're not going to get any sponsors for it unless you get to a couple thousand viewers, and that's going to take 6 months to a year. So how does the podcast align with your goal to make X amount of millions of dollars this year? And I said, you know what? You're absolutely correct. It does not. And back to the idea phase it went, and now it's not a priority for me. But I think that's the most important thing is that lots of times people are working on the wrong goal, and then it's not measurable, and they don't have somebody who is really challenging them to make sure it's the right goal and pushing them along as well. The third piece of it, and there is a third piece to this one, is I think people need to think about the goal they're achieving, but also think about what's the outcome you're looking to achieve, right? And so I'll just use my examples is I'm looking to achieve a certain amount of wealth this year so that I have a certain amount of freedom in my life so that I can do more charitable things with my time, right? So it becomes, if you take the podcast example, and my coach goes, Neal, your goal is you want more free time so you can do more charity stuff. The way that you get that is more freedom. The way that you get more freedom is by making a certain level of wealth that you can support your family, your friends, and the things that you want to do. So focus your energy into those things. And right away it becomes immensely an immense level of clarity of what you need to be focusing on. Does that help?
Yeah, that was a great piece. So now, so I guess I'm gonna go back to what you were saying previously when you said that, you know, some people, like, if this all ended tomorrow, then we're gonna have, people are just not gonna know, people are not gonna have enough time. What can, what are like some of like your top three time management tools or tips that that you have to offer for somebody who is currently working, just like the average 9 to 5, and then wakes up at like 7, and then for the more productive people who are working the 15, 16 hour workdays.
Right. So I think ultimately, the funny thing is before all this started, you know, numerous times a week I'd hear people say, "I don't have enough time," and and I'll give you a quick little story. Is that I remember when LinkedIn started to publish articles and you could write your own blogs on LinkedIn. And I kept on seeing all these people writing all these blogs, and I was like, wow, I just don't have the time. And I talked to one of my mentors about it. My mentor had said to me, just put 30 minutes on your calendar every day to write. And it actually doesn't matter whether you write one sentence or 400 words, but every day just time box it out so that you can make the time to write if you want to. And if you don't feel like it, you don't have to, but you should at least attempt it every single day. And that was how I started, was just blocking out time to do it. And sometimes that's what I would do. I would get my little reminder up in my calendar, hey Neal, it's time to write. And I'd sit in front of a screen and I'd write 3 sentences in 30 minutes, and I would just stare at my screen. I wouldn't do anything else. Wouldn't put my phone down, just had a timer on. But then over a couple days of that, I started to write more and more, and I started to become more aware of it. And then I started to like and look forward to it. So the first piece of advice, I think, for both of those groups of people is, if it's important to you, just put a slot in your calendar for it. And even though it's not going to be perfect the first couple of times, it'll get better. The second piece, and I think this applies to everybody, because I've seen people even say this about in our email inboxes, how we're overwhelmed with the amount of emails that we get. So organizing the things that are the most complicated in the morning. Do the hard stuff in the morning, and then kind of sort out the more easier, less intense stuff in the afternoon, because it's proven that we have more kind of brain power in the morning, and more ability and more deductive reasoning and more logic and just more energy in the mornings. So tackle the hard stuff in the morning and then move through it in the afternoon. It's the second thing. And then the third thing is if you're kind of doing the 15-hour days and the crazy days, pick 3 things that are must get do's every day. Like, I have 3 things today that I have to get done. I have to get a contract. I have to review a contract. I've got to read it about an equity position about acquiring a business. I have to finish a blog. And then I've got a piece of content, an online digital course that I'm writing about resilience that I have to finish. Those are my 3 things. Now, granted, other things are going to come up along the way, but I have those 3 things to get done today. Those are my goals of the day. And when I get them done, I will then celebrate the fact that if anything else happened, if I got an email, if I got a funky phone call from somebody, if I got some bad news, some good news, whatever it is, those are all great, or things I need to adjust to. But as long as I achieve my 3 things for the day, I pat myself on the back because I had a very productive day and I got the 3 things I wanted to. If I didn't, well, then I need to figure out, were they that important? And maybe they get kicked off the list after that, or maybe we refocus on them tomorrow.
Awesome. Can you like speak about some of the Army experiences and how they relate to, and how, how they're relating to business?
Sure. As I work with at different levels of different organizations these days, one of the things that I think that has become so prevalent, especially in today's day and age, for building, fast-moving, successful teams, is the most important thing is to really build a well-defined culture in your organization. No matter what it costs, no matter whether it's got to be doing free lunches, collaboration, happy hours when we're allowed to do that again, virtual happy hours, the ability for the military to train people to operate together and fluidly is one of the most effective things in today's business world. It doesn't matter how smart your team is, doesn't matter how much you're paying them, doesn't matter whether you're letting them bring their dogs to work, unless that's part of your culture. But the ability to build a like-minded team that shares similar mindsets is really going to be is the most important thing that you can do, especially during times of adversity, right? Because even if you look at it, military folks train and train and train and train for a day when they're going to get a phone call that says, hey, you might have to go do a mission in some capacity, whether it's a humanitarian thing, a combat mission, or even something like, related to the COVID virus. And what makes them so effective at doing it is they practiced over and over and over again. They have sharpened their tools to a point where they can use them at a moment's notice. And the second thing is just that culture that they have between each other to be able to mobilize. And I think really that's the thing that is one of the most amazing skill sets of people in our military. Anyone who would like some additional advice or support, my social media is I am Neal Conlon, and I'm open to having calls or reaching out or connecting in any way that I can support.